The first thing I remember wasn't the sound. It was the feeling. That strange, sinking feeling in my stomach, the kind that warns you something is wrong before your mind can explain it. It was past midnight, and the house was finally quiet. My husband was asleep beside me, his breathing slow and heavy, the way it always was after a long day. The ceiling fan spun above us, cutting through the silence with its soft, rhythmic hum. Everything looked normal, peaceful, safe. The kind of night that should have meant comfort. But I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was the guilt I didn't want to name. Or maybe it was him. Because deep down, I knew he was still awake. He had been watching me differently for weeks. No, longer than that. Watching in a way that made my heart race for reasons I didn't want to admit. He was someone who wasn't supposed to matter this much. Someone who had crossed the line without ever touching me. At least, not yet. I turned slightly, careful not to wake my husband. I remember staring at the door, telling myself I was imagining things. Telling myself I was a good wife. That I would never let a stupid moment destroy everything we had built. But then, tap. It was so soft I almost missed it. Tap. Tap. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was outside. At first, I froze. My heart began pounding so loud I was sure it would wake my husband. I told myself it was nothing. Just the wind. Just an old house making old sounds. But then my phone lit up on the nightstand. One message. No name. Just 3 words. I'm outside. Come. My hands started shaking before I even realized I had picked up the phone. I didn't need to ask who it was. I already knew. He had waited. Waited until my husband slept. Waited until the world couldn't see. Waited, for me. In that moment, everything inside me was at war. My loyalty. My curiosity. My fear. My shame. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. I wasn't that kind of woman. I loved my husband. I still do. He trusted me. He believed in me. He never imagined that one day, I would be lying there in the dark, staring at a message that could destroy our entire life. But what scared me the most wasn't the message. It was the truth. Part of me wanted to go. I slowly turned my head and looked at my husband. His face was calm, peaceful, completely unaware of the storm building just inches away from him. He looked safe. He looked like home. And yet, my feet were already touching the floor. Every step toward that door felt heavier than the last. My heart screamed at me to stop. To go back. To forget this ever happened. But my hand still reached for the handle. And when I opened it, he was standing there. In the dark. Waiting. And in that moment, I realized something I would never be able to undo. Because once I stepped outside, nothing in my life would ever be the same again. And what he said to me next is something I never thought I'd hear. I stepped outside, and the night air hit me like a wall. Cool, heavy, and full of the kind of silence that made every sound feel louder than it should. The street lamp above flickered slightly, casting shadows that danced across his face. I could barely see him, but I knew it was him. That same person who had lingered in my thoughts, the one who had made my heart skip in ways I couldn't explain. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at me, waiting, and I hated myself for the mix of fear and curiosity that made me freeze in place. I wanted to run back inside, slam the door, pretend none of this was happening. But my legs felt like they belonged to someone else, like they had a mind of their own. I remembered how it all started, months ago. Innocent conversations that were just a bit too long, texts that lingered late into the night. He had this way of talking that made me feel seen, safe, but also excited. Dangerous, in a way that I told myself I didn't need. My husband had always been good to me, kind, steady, predictable in the most comforting ways. And yet, here I was, drawn into something I couldn't yet name, something I knew I shouldn't. He stepped closer, and I felt the faintest tremble in my chest. There was a tension in the air, thick and unspoken, a pull I couldn't resist. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him to leave, to go back to my safe life. But I didn't. Instead, I asked the question that had been haunting me since I read the message. Why are you here? He smiled, that half smile that made my knees weak even though I hated myself for it. I needed to see you, he said softly, almost like it was the simplest thing in the world. And in that moment, I understood how dangerous this night could become. How one choice, one step, could change everything. I thought about my husband, sleeping just a few rooms away, completely unaware. I thought about the life I had built, the trust, the love, the routines. And I thought about the possibility of giving in, even for just a moment, and the secrets that would follow. The air felt heavier, the night darker, and I knew that the next words he said would be the ones I'd remember forever. Words that could shatter my world or bind me to a secret I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper, and what he said next sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to step back. I wanted to run. But part of me, the part one hated, couldn't move. And that's when I realized, nothing would ever feel the same again. That I felt the weight of his gaze, heavy and insistent, like it was pulling pieces of me I didn't even know existed. My mind raced. How had we gotten here? How had small, innocent interactions turned into this dangerous tension? I thought of my husband again, his face peaceful in sleep, completely unaware of the storm building just outside our bedroom. The thought of him made my heart ache, but it also made me realize how complicated this was becoming. I was standing on a line I shouldn't even be near, and yet every instinct inside me was shouting to stay. He didn't let go of my silence. He reached out, a hand hovering just close enough to tease, not touch, and said, "You deserve more than what you're settling for." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say no, to remind myself that I had everything I needed, that this was wrong. But there was a truth in his words that I couldn't deny. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about desire alone. It was about feeling seen, wanted, needed in ways I hadn't realized were missing. Suddenly, the street felt smaller, the night darker, as though every shadow was watching us. My mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. What if my husband woke up? What if someone saw me out here? Every step I considered taking toward him seemed to pull me further into a world I wasn't ready for. And yet, my feet didn't move back. They hovered, uncertain, caught between fear and curiosity, loyalty and temptation. Then I thought about the patterns I had ignored, the late-night messages, the secretive looks, the subtle changes that seemed innocent at first but now screamed warning signs. I realized this wasn't just about a single moment. It was a web, tangled and messy, with consequences that could ripple through my entire life. And as he spoke again, words soft but loaded with meaning, I felt the first real fear creep in, the kind that makes your heart pound and your stomach twist, the kind that tells you that once you cross this line, nothing will ever be the same. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. And in that moment, I knew I had no choice but to face the impossible tension pulling me in every direction. The air felt electric, thick with a tension I couldn't shake. Every sound, the creak of the porch, the distant hum of a car engine, even the whisper of leaves in the wind seemed amplified, echoing my own racing heartbeat. I couldn't tell if it was fear, desire, or a mix of both that kept me rooted in place. I could feel his presence beside me like a magnet, pulling me closer, yet at the same time warning me that this moment could shatter everything. I remembered all the little signs I had brushed off, thinking they were harmless late-night texts, sudden jokes that lingered too long, small touches that felt accidental. They weren't accidental. Not anymore. And suddenly, the weight of what I was standing in front of hit me with full force. One wrong step could destroy the life I had built, the trust one had cherished, and everything my husband believed about us. He leaned closer, his voice low, almost a whisper, yet it carried an intensity one couldn't ignore. "You know this isn't just about tonight," he said. "It's about everything we've been denying." My breath caught, and I struggled to steady myself. Denying what? The way he made me feel? Or the way I had already started to feel alive again, in ways I hadn't realized were missing for so long? I glanced back toward the house, toward the safety of the familiar, toward my husband asleep just a few rooms away. My mind was screaming at me to go back, to shut the door, to pretend this never happened. But my body, my stubborn, foolish body, refused to move. My curiosity, my fear, my hidden desires, all tangled together in a web I couldn't escape. And then he reached for me, slow, deliberate, as if testing the boundary between control and surrender. Every nerve in my body screamed, every thought collided in chaos. I knew at that moment that whatever happened next would change everything. There was no turning back. The night, the tension, the choices, they were all leading to one impossible, unavoidable moment. I took a breath, a shaky, trembling breath, and stepped forward, knowing that the world I had known for years was about to collide with something I could never have imagined. And in that instant, the silence of the night felt louder than ever, waiting for the moment when everything would come to a head. That I stepped closer, the night air wrapping around me like a shroud, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to retreat to the safety of the house, but I couldn't. Something deeper, something I didn't fully understand, was pulling me forward. And then, just as I thought I was about to cross a line I could never return from, everything shifted. A sudden noise, soft, deliberate, unmistakable, came from the shadows behind him. My stomach dropped. My eyes darted, straining to see in the darkness. Another figure stepped into the dim light. At first, I couldn't recognize who it was. My mind scrambled, trying to process the shock. It was someone I never expected, someone who knew more than they should. And the way they looked at me, it wasn't just surprise. It was judgment, and something colder, darker lurking beneath. I froze, caught between him, the stranger, and the life waiting just a few rooms away. My heart raced, my breath shallow. The man beside me, he had been watching me, pulling me in with promises and whispers, but now, suddenly, I realized there were rules I didn't understand. Secrets I had never seen were creeping into the open, threatening to unravel everything. And in that moment, the tension shifted from dangerous curiosity to real, sharp fear. The stranger's presence changed the game entirely. Words hung in the air, unspoken but heavy, and I felt the weight of their knowledge pressing down. My husband, safe, sleeping, unsuspecting, was more vulnerable than ever. And yet, here I was, caught in a storm of hidden truths and suppressed desires that had been waiting for the perfect moment to collide. He, my secret visitor, looked at me, and there was a flicker in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Something urgent, almost panicked, as if he hadn't expected to be caught in this moment of exposure. My body wanted to react, to step back, but my mind was paralyzed, trapped in a web of fear, guilt, and the undeniable pull of curiosity. Every instinct screamed that I should run, that I should go back to the safety of my husband's side, that this was a mistake I could never undo. And yet, the stranger's gaze, the way they knew more than I ever imagined, made me realize that nothing would ever be simple again. Secrets, lies, temptation, they had all aligned perfectly tonight, and I was standing right at the center. And as the night pressed in around us, the air thick with unsaid words, I knew that whatever happened next would not just test me, it would change everything I thought I knew about loyalty, trust, and the fragile life I had built. The stakes were higher than ever, and the path forward was impossible to see. Time seemed to slow as the three of us stood in the dark, the tension so thick I could feel it pressing against my skin. My heart was hammering, my mind racing faster than I could control, and every instinct screamed at me that this night could destroy everything I had ever known. He, the man who had pulled me outside, was no longer just a temptation, he was a threat to the life I had built. And the stranger's presence turned that threat into something dangerously real. Then, without warning, he stepped forward, breaking the silence. "I didn't expect anyone else to know," he said, his voice tight, almost fragile. My blood ran cold as I realized the truth. This wasn't just about desire. There were stakes I hadn't understood. Secrets, hidden deals, whispers that had been circling around my life without me even noticing. And now they had arrived in full force. I took a shaky breath and finally spoke, my voice trembling but firm. "Enough. This stops tonight." The words surprised even me, but I couldn't let fear and curiosity rule any longer. My husband, my family, the life I had carefully built, they deserved loyalty, honesty, and safety. I couldn't allow this moment to unravel all of it. The man beside me hesitated, a flicker of anger and frustration crossing his face, but in the end, he nodded, a silent acknowledgement that whatever game he had been playing was over. The stranger stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind only questions I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. I looked back toward the house, toward my husband, and felt the weight of relief and guilt at the same time. The tension that had been building for weeks, the fear, the secrets, the temptation, was finally broken. I had chosen loyalty over danger, truth over deception. I closed the door gently behind me, the night air slipping away as I stepped back into the life I had almost risked everything for. And just when I thought the nightmare was over, my phone buzzed. A message. No name. No explanation. Just 4 words that made my blood run cold. We're not done. I froze. My heart sank. The storm had passed, or so I thought, but the shadows of the night had left a mark. Something I couldn't ignore, something that promised that even though the immediate danger was gone, the story was far from over. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Some secrets never truly stay buried, and some choices follow you forever. I stared at the message on my phone, my fingers trembling as I set it down. The night had left its mark on me, not just on my nerves, but on the way I looked at my life, my husband, and myself. I realized that moments like this, moments of temptation and fear, weren't just about the people around me, they were about choices, about understanding my own limits and values. I walked quietly back into the house. My husband was still asleep, unaware of the chaos that had been swirling just outside our door. I paused at the doorway, watching him, and felt a rush of gratitude for the life I had. The warmth, the trust, the love, we had built it together. And I knew, in that quiet moment, that protecting that bond was more important than any fleeting thrill or curiosity. Over the next few days, I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about him, the man who had pulled me outside, and I realized that the danger he represented wasn't just physical. It was a reminder that the choices we make, even small ones, can spiral into consequences we never imagined. The stranger's sudden appearance had been a wake-up call, a sign that secrets have a way of surfacing, no matter how carefully we try to hide them. I also learned something about myself. I learned that I could face fear, that I could make a decision under pressure, and that loyalty and honesty were stronger than temptation. I could not change what had been, but I could control what came next. And I decided, quietly, firmly, to recommit to the life I had built, to my husband, and to the trust that we shared. The message on my phone remained unread for a while. I knew it wasn't just a threat, it was a lesson, a reminder that some chapters don't close easily. But I also knew that I had survived the night, and I had survived myself. I had faced temptation, danger, and secrets, and come out with clarity. As I turned toward the window, the sun began to rise, painting the world in soft golden light. It felt like a new beginning, not just for the day, but for me. The tension of the night had passed, but the lessons remained. Some stories change us in ways we never expect. Some choices define us. And some secrets, no matter how dark, can be the catalyst that makes us stronger. I took a deep breath, letting the morning fill me with a sense of calm and resolve. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But I had learned that even in the chaos, even in moments that scare us most, we have the power to choose. And that choice, above all, makes all the difference.